Okay, I'd like to welcome you to the second module on EDU510. And in this module, we'll be moving on to some foundational concepts in doing educational research. You'll be reading two chapters in this module, two chapters from Creswell. As you'll notice, as with most of the work that Creswell does, thank goodness he's this kind of person, they're very detailed, but very helpful chapters. So there's lots there for you to take in that will be very helpful to your own research. You'll also be reading two additional readings that you will be able to access under the Getting Started tab near the top of the eClass page. Once you click that tab, look for the tab that says Required Readings, and there you'll find a reference list with the electronic links to additional readings outside the text. So McGolden, Weems will be there, Hostetler will be there, etc. In addition to the readings listed here, you'll be participating in the forum, as you are every module from this point on. The observation assignment counted for the forum in the first module. So from this point on, you'll do regular forums in each of the modules. And you'll also be completing Part B of the observation assignment and doing the genre comparison assignment. So it's a busy module, but you do the forums anyway. This is just a regular part of learning, just like you would go to class. Part B of the observation assignment is a fairly short assignment. You've already done the hardest part of it, which is gathering the information. And now you'll be asked to do a particular task, and you can look at the instructions for that. But it's a short assignment, so it shouldn't take you too much time. The comparing publications assignment is a little more complicated, and I'd like to spend a little time looking at that assignment to be sure that we are on the same page in terms of what the expectations are. I'm going to talk about accessing the eClass website in a moment, but just to be specific about the genre comparison assignment, there are two sets of readings. The first set is numbered 1112. The second set, the second readings down here, are 21 and 22. And what we have done is found a resource that has the same research written up for a professional journal and for an academic journal. And so in looking at the set of readings about the same research, you'll be able to develop an analysis of what makes the difference. What's the difference between something in a professional journal and something in an academic journal? And in doing that, you're going to be much better set up for doing your annotated bibliography, because you'll have an idea of what kinds of things to look for. So just be sure that you choose one set or you choose the other set. I happen to have a student who actually chose one from one and one from the other, and it made it very difficult to do any kind of legitimate analysis as you're asked to do in this assignment. So I just wanted to be sure that we were on the same page about that. So it'll be either 1-1 and 1-2 or 2-1 and 2-2. So if you have any questions about that, please make sure that you let me know. But I think it's pretty clear once you start looking at the research, you'll see that these two articles are about the same research project, and then the last two papers are about the same research project. So I hope that's clear. Okay. All right, I also wanted to just go through a few things on the eClass page to be sure that everyone can find everything that they need. I think we follow a fairly similar format for most of the courses, so this may be redundant information for you, but just again to be sure that we're all on the same page. So as you'll see up here, we've got the Getting Started information, and when you click this button, well, you actually click the words beside it, you'll get a series of tabs. Here's the welcome video. the course syllabus and key dates documents, and usually in both color and black and white. So if you're colorblind, you can do the black and white one, or if you want to just save ink and so on. Pardon me. And then you have the required readings tab, which is what I talked about earlier. Accessing articles in the database basis, so there's information from the library, and how and when to contact your instructor. So that information is all there for you. Once you've had a chance to look through all of that, then news is something that we may use from time to time, but fairly rarely. But what's important here is the assignment description, samples, rubrics, and resources. So each of the assignments has its own file, and you'll find lots of information in there. Of particular interest are the rubrics and the samples. And down here you have rubrics, here you have rubrics, so that you have information that you can go to be sure that you're doing what's asked of you for that particular assignment. Underneath, in the next section, section 3, you have submit your assignments. So all your submissions are in this one section, so you don't have to scroll through all of the different modules. You can simply go to that section. And then, of course, following will be all of the modules. So I hope that clarifies where everything is. In each of the modules, there will be a video that will provide information just like this one does. And then there will be any other kinds of information that you need. Again, using the tab format so that it's a nice clean format, and you'll be able to go to that and go to find anything that, check that you are aware of everything that's going on in that particular module. All right, I hope that information is helpful to you. I'm not going to spend a great deal of time on Creswell, the chapters 3 and 4, because the information is explained so clearly and will be quite self-evident. But if there's anything that you're wondering about or have a question about, please feel free to get in touch with me and ask me about it. He goes into sometimes kind of excruciating detail, but important detail and very helpful detail in each of these chapters. And I believe that these will be chapters you'll go back to as you move forward with your research. So take the time to get to know, pardon me, I'm so sorry, I have this frog in my throat, it just won't go away. At any rate, I think that you'll find these chapters will be ones that you'll go back to as you move forward with your research. And so do take time to go through them and have become familiar with the content. They really do provide you with the kind of nitty-gritty that are the things you need to be doing and thinking about as you're doing your research. So as I've said, it's important. In chapter 3, he talks about purpose statements, research questions, hypotheses, and so on, as they relate to quantitative research. He claims that these are important because they provide study signposts, and those signposts are important to think about and state clearly. As I've mentioned, I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail. However, I would suggest that you take careful notes so that you can bring that information to your research as you develop it later on. But one of the dangers of doing research is research creep, and this is something I wanted to note in this video. You start off with a question, it's a good question, and as you're doing your literature review, you come across something that's related, you think, ooh, that would be interesting to include. And soon your problem and your research parameters have become so broad and so general that it's really hard to know what you're doing that's really meaningful because they are so broad and because they are so general. So the importance of developing a clear, manageable purpose statement, as Creswell suggests, is to provide a focus for the researcher. And that focus is the touchstone for all that you do in your research. I tell my students sometimes to have that statement up on their mirror, write it on their forearm or on their wrist so they see it all the time, put it on your desk, do whatever you have to do to keep that foremost front and center, because as you'll find, if you haven't already, that it becomes really, really easy to just let your research mushroom out of all control, because there's so many interesting things to look at. So it's important to develop a clear, manageable purpose statement that provides a focus for the researcher, and that focus is the touchstone for all that you do, and that your purpose statements also provide a track for the reader so that the reader is very clear about what you are doing, because you're clear about what you're doing and what you are not doing as well. This is equally important because the reader may critique. For example, if you have a reviewer looking at your paper, they may critique you for not doing something that's related to the study, and you need to make it clear what the exact parameters are. This is what you're doing, and perhaps this is what you're not doing. And that helps the reader to be clear about what your intent is. Creswell also makes it clear that the study signpost will be different for qualitative and quantitative research, and that each requires different approaches to writing up your purposes, statements, etc. In addition, these chapters will be helpful as you sort out the potential purpose statement for your own research, and that will enable you to focus your literature search for the annotated bibliography assignment. So let's look at the literature review, which is a key step in your research. And Creswell considers the practical steps in identifying the focus for your search, locating literature, critically evaluating and selecting the literature you use for your research, then organizing and writing it up for your literature review. The literature review enables us to learn what is already known about the phenomenon we wish to explore. So what do we already know? And then that opens up an opportunity for you to insert your research into that body of knowledge, because you're adding to that body in some way. The key terms will come out of a potential title and preliminary research focus or question. Once you put together some key terms, you can begin to locate the literature available. And of course, all of these processes are somewhat fluid. So you can go back and you can add keywords if that's important, or you can take some away if it turns out that they're not as important to your research, but it's a good place to start. Another thing to do is to get to know your librarian. They'll really be your best friend. Also get to know the library website. I would suggest going to the library page and exploring resources. In another module, I'll provide a little bit of a tour. But you can certainly do that on your own, and you click on some of the resources and you'll find all kinds of things that are really important to what we're doing in this course, as well as your in So I won't take time now, but I'll point those out when they're a little more pertinent in modules to come. In terms of evaluating, the library page has some useful information. Some of the questions you need to ask include, is the article, and I'll point that out, is the article from a legitimate peer-reviewed journal? Is this of value to my study? You will need to evaluate whether this article, which may be very worthy and interesting, actually enhances your understanding of your research problem or question, or is it just simply an interesting paper that really doesn't add a lot to what you need to understand? When we get to a discussion of the annotated bibliography, I'll go into this in more detail. Then you need to organize the literature, and Creswell has some ideas about that are really useful. In addition, as we work our way through the annotated literature review assignment, you will explore one way of writing up a review. There are others, but it's probably the most common way, and we'll talk about that further when we get to that assignment in the course. All right, we'll switch gears a bit and consider the Magolda and Weems article. It's an interesting and very accessible article and takes on the important ethical dilemmas that researchers encounter when working with human, or in some cases animal, but we're more concerned with human subjects. If you've done any research, you're well aware of the many issues they raise, and even better, if you haven't, it's excellent for ensuring that new researchers are attuned to the ethics of doing research, particularly in qualitative research. Not that they don't emerge in quantitative work, and Hostetler gives some examples of that, but the effects tend to be muted by the less direct interactions between the researcher and the subject of the research. The implications, however, of quantitative research can have huge ethical implications, and that's something to be aware of as well. Magolda and Weems discuss qualitative research in which you are building relationships of trust between the researcher and those being researched, and that raises some very significant ethical dilemmas. Of course, each institution has their own ethical guidelines and review processes that must be considered, and your research approved before it can proceed. For example, at the University of Alberta, we have an ethics board, and any research that is about human subjects has to be written up in a specific format that the ethics board mandates, and it needs to be evaluated by that ethics board. Everyone who is researching human subjects must have their research approved based on the university criteria, and those criteria are set by not within the university as well as by national bodies, ethics bodies of research. Approvals are regularly monitored by a national organization, and universities take this step very seriously because they can have funding withdrawn as a result of not conforming to the requirements. But as McGold and Weems suggest, this doesn't end the ethical responsibility you hold. As you embark on a qualitative study, your relationship with participants is premised on trust. But the nature of qualitative research is that you are building knowledge together, so you don't know with certainty what might emerge. Therefore, the respondent trusts that you will take care in the research that you do. So they go into some of the dilemmas, that is, McGold and Weems go into some of the dilemmas that have come up in their research that exemplify the kinds of quandaries all qualitative researchers have encountered. For example, the gatekeeper, who might be the superintendent or the principal, whoever it is that allows you to approach respondents or subjects for your research and ask if they will participate. They may be really excited that you want to research their work or school system or whatever, and have said yes before you have fully disclosed possible risks. Do you stop, or do you continue with possible negative effects? So it's sort of like, the pharmacy advertisements on TV where they have someone, running through a field of daisies feeling wonderful because they're taking Humira or whatever. And they put up front all the wonderful things that are going to happen. And then the little or longer trailer at the end about all the possible effects that the voiceover goes through very, very quickly. That's not a particularly ethical way to present the dilemmas that might come up for those who participate. So you have to ask yourself, do you stop or do you continue with possible negative effects? They've said yes. Of course, the ethical position is that you have to discuss with them what are some of the possibilities. Even in a fairly benign study, there may be things that you both need to think about together. There may be harm to the broader community as well as your research becomes public. A principal may be identified even though their name hasn't been used. A school could be identified. A school system could be identified unwittingly because of something that was said, and two ideas were put together and you come up with an identification. Or the research may be used by others to the detriment of the community, and we've seen many examples of this, particularly in First Nations communities. Therefore, we have to be sensitive and do what we can to prevent these possibilities. There's potential harm to the researcher as well. The emotional labor of working through these issues can be wearing, or if you make the wrong decision, your reputation may be affected. Key is to take account of the power issues. Who has the power to speak, and how is that organized? Who has the power to reveal or conceal? And how can power relationships be mediated to better serve everyone's interests so that harm does not occur or it's mitigated significantly? And of course, in all of this, you're balancing the harm potential with the possibility to do meaningful research. And there have been examples, I know of examples, where people have gone through the whole research process, but the gatekeeper at the end, who part of the agreement was that they would see the write-up of research, withdraws permission at that point, which they have a right to do. Or a participant reads the transcript and says, no, I'm not going to let you use this information. So, them knowing what their rights are can sometimes affect your research and may alter its meaningfulness in a certain kind of way, but still the ethical position has to trump that. So McGold and Weems use examples from their own research to illustrate the complex negotiations that may be a part of ethical qualitative research, and in doing so offer us an instructive article that expands our understanding of the complex nature of ethical research. And last we have, having raised some ethical dilemmas, McGold and Weems provide some possibilities to consider in order to mitigate the possibility of harm. This might be a good place to start when considering the prompt questions for this module's forum, for example. So I'll leave you with these possibilities to ponder, which you will find in the McGold and Weems article, and I would encourage you to read them carefully. And then last we have the Hostetler article, in which he considers what is good research. Up until now, our readings, for example, Creswell, have suggested that good research is research that is methodologically supportable. It is something that we could recommend as being done correctly or corresponds to best research practice. But Hostetler asks this question from the perspective of an education philosopher whose research specialization is the study of ethics. And he makes a statement near the end of the paper that summarizes his discussion and raises really important possibilities for research in a larger philosophical sense. He says, as education researchers, we have a particular obligation and opportunity to take a leading role in seeing that the research that is done is truly good research. As we do our work, we need to think beyond questions of how we will study students or analyze school policies, although of course we'll do that. We need to think about how we can make life better for people. We need to think beyond our taken for granted ideas of well-being and what is good, and make those ideas the objects of serious communal inquiry. Serving people's well-being is a great challenge, but it is also our greatest calling. And so I'll leave you with that thought, because I think it's an important one at the heart of thinking about the kinds of questions that we ask, the ways in which we organize our research, the ethical positions that we take, and the results of that research and its implications for the broader community. In pursuing that calling, I think Hostetler actually offers some significant fodder for discussions in Module 2 and the modules that will follow. And I think that you'll enjoy his article very much. So I hope you found this presentation helpful in sorting through all of the various readings for this particular module. And I look forward to your feedback and your discussion in the forum discussions that are to follow. Take care.